All right, I am live. Hello, video on demand people. So, I promised, and now I'm just going to get to it. So, for those of you that don't know, there is a special. Screw it. I'm going to look at the screen instead of the camera. There is a special challenge started in like 2023 called Dungeon 23, where you make one dungeon room a day for a whole year, and then you would have a 12 levels deep mega dungeon that you could run a whole campaign through. It sounded cool, and it's very on brand with all the like dungeon centric stuff, dungeon crawling stuff that I'm like doing and thinking about all the time. But at the time, I felt kind of overwhelmed with other stuff I was doing, so I didn't jump on it. And I felt bad that I missed out. And then when 2024 came around and someone was like, Dungeon 24, I was furious. What? I could have jumped on? I thought it was a one time thing. And so last year, I did it, even though I did Dungeon 25, even though at first I felt self conscious and thought, oh, am I going to look stupid? And everyone's going to be like, no one's doing that anymore. Who cares? And to my delight, there were a few people who were like, I'm here, man. I was like, oh, hey, awesome. And so I did it. I finally did it because I wanted to stop being bummed that I never did it. But I also wanted to do it because it was a good excuse to get a head start on a dungeon I'm going to use for my Treasure Taker series. This deep, grueling, difficult dungeon that's like an ancient tomb. It's, like an Egyptian tomb kind of deal is the goal. So I did that. I did the challenge. I failed it, by the way. I missed like one day because I was working on other things, and then it was past midnight, and I realized, oh, I didn't do one for today. Okay. But I found that I enjoyed it, and I continued anyway. I am now, as in right now, taking that dungeon that I made, that Egyptian tomb style dungeon, and I'm fashioning it into a playable dungeon instead of just a loose collection of rooms and sketches. For my game shop group, I have a group of people that I run 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons for at my local game shop. And we recently ended our campaign, and there are a couple people that are leaving, but one's leaving, one left already, and then one's leaving like months into the future. I didn't want to start a campaign to have one person leave and then a little while later another person leave. So I offered them like 3 different things that we could do, one of which being I could fashion a dungeon out of this thing. And they said, we want to continue playing our characters because they're like level 8 or whatever, and they want more. And so even though I'm not much of a expansion guy, I thought, sure, good excuse. So I'm going to refashion stuff inevitably, but right now I'm just taking what I've got and I'm fashioning into a shorter dungeon of merely 6 levels instead of the full 12 because they're already like level 8. So it'd be kind of boring going through like 4 or 5 levels that aren't a challenge and then it begins. That's where we're at. They have been going through the first level that I have made for them of this dungeon for, I think, about 4 sessions. This particular level, I went kind of generic and kind of not, in that this level is basically the guy's zoo / trying to motivate people to like stay out. There are rooms with different powerful monsters or sets of monsters inside them, because you can't throw a single monster by itself and have it be too much of a challenge, not without action-oriented design and all that stuff, which I do when I'm not forgetting to do them. But basically the first level has these monsters that the guy is prideful about, the It's called the Tomb of Akhmet-Set. Terrible working title name. This first floor is monsters, and then on either side of the monsters, there are rooms that are obstacles or traps, with the idea that they're here to keep the monsters in, to keep other people out. If there's an intruder who gets past the fake alternate entrances, which my players did, by the way, that would have been a silly story. They didn't. We spent 4 sessions and we're still at the front door. That would have been funny, but no. So basically, monsters, traps. It's a deterrent, but it's also this ruler showing off the cool monsters that he took from different places. And that's the theme. I find it easier for me to tackle dungeons if I'm thinking about them in that kind of makes sense, logical kind of way. I'm not immune to the wiles of the Funhouse dungeon, but it's just easier for me to figure out rooms and things if I'm thinking about like a realistic working place. And if I deviate, I deviate. I won't regale you with stuff from the lead-up sessions. I'm just going to talk about the most recent one. And so we will. The most recent session, my players had left off inside this room that had a bunch of dead bodies in it. I think this idea is really clever. Maybe it's not. But one of the rooms, one of the like trap obstacle rooms, is a room that has a ton of bodies in it. And these bodies have been decaying, some not for very long, some for centuries, and are basically skeletons. The room is like a giant stink bomb, basically. And it has, like, the doors have wax, like, wedged into the areas around the doors. So if you break the seal, you stink up the whole place. My intention, this is where we get to design talk. My intention was, you've basically poisoned the rest of this whole floor. And from now on, you're going to have to be making Constitution saves against the like stank of this place, and it's going to be an obstacle. I have not done a good job of enforcing that, but people made their Constitution saves. My players have pretty good stats and tend to make their saves. Like, maybe it's just 5th edition, but I think I know what I will do to make this better. Because, like, the thing is, when do I ask them to make saves? I just kind of forget about it and just end up not doing it. I modeled it after how extreme heat and extreme cold in 5th edition are like environmental things where you make a save every hour or so against, a DC. And I've just kind of not really been doing that. I keep track of dungeon time because it's one of my many dungeon crawling related fetishes. But I haven't really been stopping them. And so I've been thinking about how to do this when I do it again with another group. How do I do this where I make it easier on myself to remember to have them make checks? And one of my ideas was maybe I could just attach it to like every time they fight. Like every time they fight, I go, well, when you fight, you're breathing in more, and so it's more noticeable. Make saves. Otherwise, they'll be poisoned. Or if we want to be sterile about it, we could say they'll have the poisoned condition, which just means disadvantage for an hour. But that's a long time when you're dungeon crawling. I've poisoned a player before. And oh, am I unpoisoned yet? Like, no, you've got like 40 minutes left on it. And it's, oh, I'm poisoned now? No, you've got like 38 minutes left. Not much time has passed, man. That's fun. Anyway. So I could just link it to fights. I could just try to I'm keeping track of time. Maybe I could set an alarm on my phone and just every hour or so. This would be a lot easier in something like Shadow Dark, where keeping track of time as like a procedure instead of something that you just kind of added on, like it is here, 5th edition, blah, blah, blah. So, maybe I'll do that. And I definitely want it to be a hindrance and not like you lose turns and stuff, just for the record. Someone just randomly like put where they had left. That's the first person who's leaving had like, it was his last session. He just cast like ice storm or hailstorm on the thing and froze the corpses, which mitigated the smell a little bit, I guess. Didn't really solve the problem. People were worried that like something would burst out of the corpse pile. There was a lot of examination that was happening of the corpse pile, which is actually good. If you play in my current game, don't watch because spoilers. There's this monster from Yu-Gi-Oh, like OG Yu-Gi-Oh, that like travels through stone. It's called Diabound. I think it's really cool. I think it's a really cool demon, and I have loved to death the idea of some horrible monster that drifts through the dungeon, and worst case scenario, it catches you while your party's trying to rest in the dungeon, and it just like pulls your head into stone, and then there's just nothing you can do. But because everyone else is resting and unaware, it just does that over and over again, and just people die. This is the thing about being a GM. If you're me and a GM, you have these cool. I want people to die in terrible, horrible ways in my game. No, but it would be really exciting. It would be cool from like a conceptual standpoint. I don't know. But there's some foreshadowing I want to have for basically this roaming random encounter boss, this boss on the random encounter table. And one of the signs is here. There are bodies, and people, because they were suspicious of the body pile and like examined it and were investigating it, someone was able to notice some of these bodies are fresher and they've got big, huge bite marks taken out of them, but they're mixed with stone chips, which the players, or at least one player, was able to connect perfectly. Oh, that means that they were in stone while they were being eaten. Oh, that doesn't sound very good. It's like, yes, it doesn't. By the way, the logic of this stink bomb room, it originally had old corpses, but like the roaming boss also throws its leftovers here as well. It's kind of a little synergy thing. So that was pretty good. People inspected it, they were suspicious about it, but ultimately they moved on. And they moved on to okay, sorry, I'll be back. Okay. That's the old rice maker that's going well worn. All right. Sorry, had to take my mom to an appointment real quick. So anyway, they were suspicious of those bodies. So I got my foreshadowing of this monster out there. Awesome. They move on. They eventually come to a chamber, as in like the next chamber they come to is one with a big T-Rex in it. Though I describe the T-Rex, I describe it, I don't just say, it's a T-Rex. There are some GMs that I see that do that, and I actually think it's good. It can be a little clunky and weird sometimes, but on the flip side, it also makes it a bit more magical than just, it's a T-Rex. Though eventually we had to just call it a T-Rex. As it goes. This part was a little bit of a bummer. Because I have a version of the tomb that I like, my scratch paper version, so to speak, where I have these notes and diatribes, and then I have the for-print version that I print out and bring to my games. So I just mixed it up basically because I looked at my notes, and recently I went back and I like beefed up the encounters because I think I was kind of undershooting it. This is the old T-Rex. I don't know how I got my notes switched, but I did. The bonus of making something yourself is you can kind of remember it, so I just did my best to kind of remember it. And then it didn't end up mattering anyway. The monk, stunning fist, struck the T-Rex and stunned it. And then everybody else did so much damage, they just ripped that thing apart before it got to go again. It got one save that it failed, and then like that was it. And I want to highlight this because there's so often that I have talked copious shit about how the monk's stunning fist strike is actually bad because it targets Constitution. And Constitution, monsters are going to have good Constitution. Odds are they're going to make their save. It's setting you up to fail. It should really be Wisdom instead of Constitution. And I don't think what I said is necessarily wrong, but here it certainly worked just fine. So they ripped that thing to shreds. Turned out it didn't matter that I didn't have my notes with all its special actions and things. I remembered that it did its terrifying roar. And it's kind of funny because most of the party in the campaign before this got a boon that made them immune to fear, but also something else. And when I described it, they were like, fear, we're immune to fear. And I was like, oh yeah, that's right. And then then the fight proceeded. For what it's worth, the room itself had like a platform in the middle that had the T-Rex on it and like some space. And there was like a trench around the room. And that trench this is some extra details here, but what else is this thing for? The trench, like the walls are sheer. So basically, unless you're really specialized in climbing, you can't climb back out. And this is a fun inclusion. So if you're one of my players in my current game, definitely don't see this because it will ruin the magic. I went a little soft. I gave the T-Rex a reaction. When someone hits it in melee, it had a tail whip that then it smashes into you with its tail, and you got to make a save or else it flings you 30 feet. This is important because there's the platform, there's the trench. If you get bam right into the wall and then fall down, that's bam, that's fall damage. You're in a 60-foot trench, so it's really difficult for you to get out again. You get to join all the bodies of the deceased down here, as well as some loot, which is down there too. And when the monk player was going, he stunning fisted at the end of his like big thing of strikes. When he made his first hit, I did think to myself, I could tail whip here. And if he doesn't make his save, then this basically will fling him far enough away, he can't make the rest of his attacks. Let's be nice and wait until his last hit. After his last hit, I'll tail whip. That feels a little better, right? And his last hit was the stun that basically meant the monster didn't get to do anything. I've monologued about this with myself before, but being a GM is definitely a balance of you will have many opportunities to challenge the players. Be nice this time. You'll catch up. And simultaneously the feelings of fuck them kids. And you gotta like pick, you gotta choose. You gotta balance it. Anyway, fun fact, if I'd played the T-Rex in a different way, it probably would have been more challenging. That's on me. And it's just something that happens. So they viciously stomp this T-Rex. They get some loot. They carve it up because I got one of those players that carves into monsters and shit. And early on I said, hey, there are special monster parts and things that you can harvest from people because I like that kind of thing. Though I was thinking about spellcasting components because, Matt Colville's company made a magazine briefly, like a digital magazine, and one of the articles in there by the person who I should really be giving the credit, but I don't know their name, they made these like special spellcasting components that you could harvest from monsters. I was thinking more like that. My party is basically no spellcasters somehow. Like there's a ranger in there. The newest person is a paladin, so okay, technically. We had a wizard, but that dude left. We have a bard, so that's definitely very spellcasty. Whatever. Point being, they stopped, they got loot, they carved. One of the pieces of loot they got was a bag of tricks. And after they got a weasel out of the bag of tricks, when trying to make up their minds about which way to go, they started just following the weasel. Like, we'll leave it up to the weasel. And while I think this is funny, and I don't have a problem with it, it did make me think about this thing that I'm just thinking about more and more these days, which is the player tendency to try to push the choice making off onto someone else. Like any other GMs that might see this, isn't it kind of weird how often players will try to like get someone else to decide, someone else to choose, someone else to tell them what to do? Like, it's not a role-playing game unless you're making your own choices and seeing them play out, for better or for worse. That's like a really big thing with me. And so maybe I'm extra sensitive to it, but always, players are always looking for like some kind of confirmation, some kind of, what's the correct choice? Let me see if I can find out. And like, that's not what it's about, man. Which is maybe a little harsher than like what I feel in this moment. Though I did comment on it at the game. It was like, it's kind of funny. You could choose yourselves, but you're following this weasel. Okay. They spent a lot of time in the T-Rex room doing their harvesting and they took a short rest. They were like identifying loot and stuff. Originally, I was rolling for a random encounter just whenever they like lingered somewhere. And I'm still doing that, but what I actually changed was I was copying Shadowdark and rolling a d6, and if it landed on a 1, then that meant a random encounter, and then I would roll on a different, like the random encounter table, and we'd see what's up. But I decided, that's really too little. In Shadowdark, when it's more regimented, it makes sense for it to be low, because you're going to be rolling a lot. But if I'm only rolling when people are, like, hanging out for a long time, I'm not rolling nearly as often. That's too small. So I changed it to, like, 1 to 2 is like an encounter. And I got one. finally. The one that I got was actually not like a fight random encounter, but one of the random encounters I have is like a hand just sticking up out of stone, which is foreshadowing for that monster that I talked about that I thought was so cool. They encountered that, which was kind of convenient given the stuff with the bodies earlier in the session. But hey, I'm down. They basically broke up the floor and exhumed what I improvised would be like a body that was bitten in half. They didn't feel like looting it. I didn't describe it as making it sound like it had much on it, because it doesn't really. I would have rolled for something hidden on there if they'd really pressed it, but no big deal. And so this, they looked over this body. They're like, can we do anything for them? They're poking and prodding. More foreshadowing. That's cool. That's great. I'm super down. The next room they came to was technically a secret room. I have these secret rooms in this level and maybe other levels too, where basically a bunch of bodies of like the dead workmen who built the place are rotting, and they come out as like zombie hordes because I think that's cool. And the thing is, they come to a place that smells really bad, and then it smells really bad, and then the zombies come out of like a secret compartment, which I hope will make people think about the possibility of secret doors in the hallways themselves, because I don't always provide like grids for the hallways. I've just been providing grids for like the rooms, and like if they come into a trap, if they encounter a spike pit or something in the hallway, I might do that too. So I was hoping these things would, make them think, there are hidden rooms and hallways, even if he doesn't bust out the paper for it. But two, since it smells really bad, I thought maybe someone might stop and go, why does it smell so bad? Nobody did. So the zombies came out and attacked them from behind, which wasn't that big a deal. The party is strong, but I finally got to deploy that. I somehow didn't have zombie stat blocks on me, even though I thought I did. So I basically just improvised it, and I used like the basic zombie from the monster manual that raises again if you don't do enough damage, or if you don't do radiant damage to it. And so a few of them rose. I think that feature is potential. I love undead, and I love the idea of undead being more difficult to fight. But that feature, whenever I've read it, always sounded kind of annoying. In this case, when they were taken down like zombies in one hit, or, two, if they were really unlucky, it actually worked pretty all right. It was a diversion, but I was fine with it. It's a thematic diversion. The next room they came to was one of the obstacle rooms, which might make sense if you remember what I said earlier about how the structure of this place, which I don't think anyone's noticed, is obstacle, monster, obstacle in its array. There are different branches and stuff, but every monster is hemmed in by two obstacle trap type rooms. So, monster, we travel for obstacle. The room that they came to, the room that the weasel went to, is this room that had these massive orbs that block the doorway, and you basically have to push them through. Basically, there are three. The room is 40 by 40, 40 feet by 40 feet, and there are three massive polished orbs of gemstone: amethyst, jade, and I forget the third one. And you basically have to push through this place. You need to be really strong, or, combine the group strength. But there are also saves, because the orbs, there are three of them, but there are 4 spaces, and if you push one, the others will fall into place. So you have to be careful not to get smashed while trying to push through. They're coming at this from the other side. The entrance to the dungeon and like all that other stuff is from over here. They're coming at it from over here. Just side note, it's not super important. One person in the group is super strong because of stuff that happened in the campaign and, well, gear. They're really strong because of gear, like physically. So I didn't intend for this room to be a really big deal for this particular party, and it wasn't. But they did inspect. They did talk a bunch of time. They took a bunch of time talking about whether or not they wanted to like do this now or come back later. Once they finally realized it was like gemstone because they're using dark vision, and so I was a little coy about. I didn't tell them they were gemstone. I just told them they were big orbs and they were shiny. It's only when someone lit an actual light it was like, oh, you can tell it's gemstone. They probably could have told before that, but like whatever. Use torches. I don't hate dark vision, but I like torches. I wish there was no dark vision in 5th edition, quite frankly. And I guess I could just in the future go, there's no dark vision, shut up in my game. My God. No, kidding. But maybe. They spent enough time hemming and hawing about should they come back to this room later? Should they try to like break and get the gemstone stuff out of there because they want treasure, which is good because I like treasure. It'd be really bad if my group didn't care about treasure because I care about it, even if I'm bad at giving loot exactly. I like money. I like money and gemstones and things like that. That's also a fetish of mine. Like, yeah, I can appreciate a +1 sword or a wand of lightning bolts, but give me coins that have like an emperor from the like 3rd century on them. Give me that give me that copper and ruby finish diadem. That's me. That's me. Anyway. So they spent enough time there that I rolled for a random encounter, and I got one. And it was Diabound. And if you look back, you would assume that I just crafted it, like it was just a session I intended. Well, you're going to inspect those bodies, you're going to find that hint, and then you're going to have the random encounter with the other hint, and then he's going to attack you at the end of the session. But, like, I didn't do that on purpose. This is 100% a happy accident. Though, it also could have been a little more dangerous. Because basically the thing reaches up from the stone and then just tries to like pull somebody down. But I rolled a 1 on the dude's thing. So basically their first encounter, which is still creepy and scary if you think about it, outside of the context of the dice, the gnome player like turned, it was like, what? Because like a thing brushed against his leg. And I described, you see like this clawed like demonic finger part of a hand just go back down into the stone. And they were like, oh, they were already kind of on guard for this stuff. They were like, oh, uh-oh. More details that if you're part of my current game, do not listen to. This creature basically has like tremor sense and it like sees through the stone, but its eyesight isn't great. Its appraisal of people isn't great. The gnome might think, oh man, why are you targeting me all the time? But like in this case, the creature's like, hey, you're small. I can get you. So the fight was on. I have deployed a monster that I've deployed a Zorn before, which is this elemental that like goes through stone and dirt. It's like a land shark that eats gems or likes eating gems. So I've already done kind of this thing before, so people weren't as frustrated as maybe new players would be to it, because the monster's in the stone and you can't really target it with anything. So people were basically just like holding actions to hit it when it came up. But this thing is different. For UC, this thing, in addition to this is real spicy information. This thing, Diabound, because I haven't given it a better non-copyright infringing name, but it's okay because it's just my home game. In addition to being able to drift through the stone, it also has this ability that basically turns stone briefly into like liquid, so you sink into it and then it solidifies again, where people have to make a save, a strength save, and if you don't make your strength save, you get trapped in the stone partially, like restrained, basically. It did that. So everybody's like got their weapons ready and they're like ready for when it comes up. And then I go, oh no, it doesn't come up. Instead, you're all grouped up. It's attacking them in a hallway, which is really good because that means they can't spread out very easily. But wouldn't you know it, it uses this ability. People sink. Most people, everybody but one person, everybody but the monk makes their save. Kind of a bummer, kind of depressing. Makes me feel like maybe the save should be higher. It's DC 18, which is reasonably high. People seem to make 18 pretty easily, but the one time that I made the DC 20 on like a fear thing, it was disastrous. So I kind of, I don't know, man. Part of it is luck. There's at least one person in the party, like I said, the barbarian, who's like super strong, so I'm not surprised you made it, but like other people, I don't know. Especially with like, I don't know, especially with the fact that I give out inspiration at the beginning. I do a custom thing with inspiration where I give everybody inspiration at the beginning of the session. I basically copy how Shadow Dark does its luck tokens, or like how Pathfinder does its, don't worry about that, or like how Pathfinder does its like hero points. Because I kept on forgetting to give out inspiration, and then after the session had already passed, I would think about something somebody did, because that's how inspiration is supposed to work. Oh, you give it to a player who does good role playing or something. And it's like, well, I think about inspiration after the session when I'm going, oh, player X did a really cool thing. I should give them inspiration, which is too late. Really, it's too late, and I just give it to them straight off. And this is how I do it. So between that and this someone, at least one person being pretty strong, it's a party of like largely martial characters. Maybe that's another part of it. I don't know. But only one person failed to save. Hello. Okay, I'll see you soon. Yeah, I just said I'll see you soon. Bye. To finish up briefly, they made the save. One person didn't make the save. The people got that person out of there. I had the thing try to attack through the wall. Again, this time people had saves. They had their prepared attacks ready. They hit it. They smote it. They otherwise like messed with it, like moved the hand because the hand came through, and someone with like psychic powers like pushed the hand, and then people like hit the hand, and the hand like went back, and then it had a third attack. It gets 3 attacks. And it also has this like tail thing. So people were like, they know where the hand is. They struck back against it. We're ready for you, Diabound evil demon thing. And then this snake thing came up, bit onto the gnome. The gnome failed their save, and whoop, down he went. And that's where we ended. Seems so simple when I lay it out like that, but there's a lot of time, a lot of deliberation, and what a cliffhanger. But don't worry, there are suffocation rules. He's got like at least 3 rounds of being trapped in the dark, bitten to death by Diabound, before he dies for real. And so next time I do one of these, we'll find out if that gnome makes it or not, as well as other stuff. If you found this interesting, awesome. And otherwise, I'll see you.